Hi, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be playing with some colour burst powders, which are a highly pigmented watercolour powder that activate when you add some water to it. So I'm just starting off again in my Dina Wakley journal on the cotton rag paper. Now I know from past experience that the cotton rag paper really doesn't like watercolour. It just doesn't let it spread, so it needs sealed in some way. I do have watercolor primer, but I just use gesso for this. Now, if you did this technique on proper watercolor paper, it would look a lot more effective than it did on this page. Watercolors and gesso do affect each other in a slightly different way. It sort of dulls it down and doesn't let it do what watercolors like to do as much. So just be aware of that. If you've got some really nice watercolor paper, have a go at doing this. Even on some good quality cardstock, it would work okay. So with the color burst powders, I'm just sprinkling it out. You can see where the gesso was a little bit wet. It just started to activate, and with a spritz of water you just get these beautiful colours. I do suggest you put some scrap paper in between what you're doing, so it doesn't bleed onto the next page. Once you've done that, I'm just sort of sponging it off and drying it off as it goes. Again, with watercolours, they do look best if you can leave them to dry as long as possible. Now, the reason why I was sort of sponging it off as I went was because in my Dina Wakley journal at the moment, it's nearly at the end. I'm working in the last signature, and it is very, very full, so it's already tipping everything into the middle, and I didn't want lots and lots of liquid going into my spine because that would weaken the pages and help them to fall out. So as I'm going, I'm sort of drying or sponging up. Now, you know, someone who's been to art school should possibly know a little bit better about mixing purple and yellows, because you just get mud, you get brown. Just be aware of your colour theory when you're doing this. Yeah. While I like the yellow and purple, I needed to make sure the purple was completely dry. Obviously, you're working with colour reactive materials, so as soon as you put water on them, they're going to reactivate and mix together again. Now, I'm trying to combat that by putting some more of the purple, which I quite like, but because my page was so full, you can see that water sort of dripping down into the spine, which again, I wasn't 100% happy with. So this page, I suppose, is a really good example of, best intentions not necessarily working out the way you want to. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, you can see that really intense purple and pink colour. To be honest, I wish I hadn't actually sealed my page with the gesso. You can see the strong contrast in how it worked. The reason I sealed it was because I have had past experience with using sort of watery things in here, and I also had artwork on both of the other pages, and I knew if I hadn't sealed my page, all the water that I was adding would have seeped through to those pages and would have started to affect those. So again, that's sort of something to keep in your mind when you're working in these sorts of journals. I just loved how it worked on the edge, and I actually ended up, after I finished this page, doing it again on a single sheet of paper, and I really loved the effect. So take what I've done and then do it properly afterwards. So now I'm going in with a stencil and putting some modelling paste over the top. And you can see, to begin with, I've got a really, really crisp white image over the top, which I love. It just adds that beautiful effect to the page, and this isn't a stencil I've used very much, but it's just beautiful for this effect. And again, I'm sort of going through the middle. Now again, as I said before, that this material is water reactive. The texture paste is wet, so it is going to reactivate the ink from underneath, and it is going to seep up through. You can see that happening in some of the parts already. The colour's starting to creep up through the texture paste and just changing the effect completely. So make sure that when you've done this, that the watercolour is very, very dry. I should have waited a little longer. But with watercolor, it is water reactive, so even putting that on, it will still seep up in some way, shape or form. So now I'm just drying it off, and you can particularly see on the right hand page how that white has just suddenly disappeared. So I'm going to put some white gesso over the top just to bring the white back, I think, and then some Inca Gold wax, again just to bring out the texture of the page and just to add it in. The gold also plays along with the yellow that I've got in the background, just to pick it up slightly. The stamping in the background, again, I didn't wait until my page was very dry. You can see now that I've waited, I'm getting a much better impression with my stamping. So basically, the things to take away from this video is don't gesso, wait for everything to dry, be aware that your modelling paste will suck up the colour from underneath, and when you're going to go stamp, wait for it to dry. Yeah, don't do as I do, do as I say. To add into this piece, I decided that I wanted to add a quote along the middle. I'm trying to keep, one of my goals this year is to try and keep a little bit more white space in what I do, and it's something I'm really struggling with. So this page I deliberately left really open. I'm just going to put a quote, and I'm using it on a white piece of paper that's slightly bigger, so adding in more white again. And I'm using a Dina Wakley stamp, and it says "Kindle Your Spark of Madness," and sticking that down. I've just edged it with a little bit of black. Now as I was doing this, it was really bothering me that I'd lost that beautiful white that I had there. So I was trying to come up with solutions of what I was going to do. I didn't actually go in with the white paint. I'm just going in with the Inca Gold just to go over the top. But I think if I did this again in future, I would actually possibly either mix some gesso into my texture paste to hopefully keep it a little bit more opaque, or perhaps use a brayer over the top with white gesso so it just hit the top of that texture paste, to put that white back in it again, because I think it really needed it. While looking at this in real life, I quite like it. There's nothing to compare to that first putting that texture paste down when it had that really strong white contrast on the page. So yeah, I think mixing the gesso into the texture paste would be the best way to do that. That's something for me to experiment with next time. If you guys have a chance to do it and it works for you, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you solve that problem, or if you've got some suggestions for me. But all in all, this is a fun page to do, and I've actually made a card using this same technique, and I loved the card. It worked beautifully. So it has worked. It's just the way to go. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you later.